I'm going to invite Erin Penner to come up here and do the reading. So if you guys want to read along with her, we're going to be reading all of Proverbs chapter 8. If you're following along, you want to grab that mic? Okay.
Is it because I'm a woman, or is it because I speak fast?
Either. Both.
Wise choice.
Yeah.
Chapter 8. Does not wisdom call, and does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights, beside the way, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Beside the gates, in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries out, To you, O people, I call, and my cry is to all that live. O simple ones, learn prudence. Acquire intelligence, you who lack it. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to one who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. I, wisdom, live with prudence, and I attain knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. I have good advice and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. By me, kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me, rulers rule, and nobles, all who govern rightly. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness along the paths of justice, endowing with wealth those who love me and filling their treasuries. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth. When he had not yet made earth and fields, or the world's first bits of soil. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the fountains of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was beside him, like a master worker, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world and delighting in the human race. And now, my children, listen to me. Happy are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Happy is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But those who miss me injure themselves. All who hate me love death.
Well, thanks, Erin. I'll tell you, while I was reading this passage initially, this passage that's about Lady Wisdom, I thought maybe I didn't have the right voice to really pull off this reading. Even though I constantly, when I get calls from telemarketers, they insist on referring to me as Mrs. Hunter. I mean, come on, guys. Like, tenors exist, but that's not what I came here to talk about. I'm here to talk about what wisdom is, because that's what this passage is about. It comes toward the end of a very long introduction, 10 chapters, to the introduction to the book of Proverbs. And today's reading is from a part in that introduction where we're invited to consider the question, what is wisdom really? Now, for those of you who think I'm going to jump immediately into some weird Hebrew word, you're absolutely correct. The term in the Hebrew that gets translated wisdom here in Proverbs and elsewhere is chokhmah. Chokhmah. And I mention that mostly because it's fun to say. Typically, when we encounter chokhmah in the Bible, it's not primarily a philosophical idea. It is an attribute of God. It's part of who he is. It's something that discloses things about God whenever we find it. So what sorts of things do we attribute to God? Righteousness? Yes. Power? Yeah. Love? Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, there's the end of the, well, at least the Protestant version of the Lord's Prayer, right? We attribute kingdom, power, and glory all to God. And we do that because we think of those things as things that really genuinely belong to God and are part of who he is. So whenever we find those things like love and righteousness and power in the world, they're supposed to be pointing us back toward God. And I think also when we find them, we see evidence of God's creative activity. I'm uncomfortable, generally speaking, with immutable laws or categorical statements, but I'm about to make one, so I probably will regret it. But it seems to me to be an immutable law of creation that an artist always leaves some identifying elements in his or her creation. Kaylin and I were out at the library just this week, and there at the Jessamine County Library, they've got this big wall of TV screens, and they have different things and that they show. And we walked out, and Kaylin comes running over. They had this big art piece that I had never seen before. She just sees it and runs up and is like, "Ooh, pretty!" And I looked at it, and I'd never seen this piece of art before, this particular work, but I knew immediately who had done it. I recognized it because if you've ever seen any of Van Gogh's work, it's pretty distinctive. Or Van Gogh, if you're pretentious or British, which is the same thing. My grandfather, though, was really concerned that all of us homeschooled kids get a proper art education. He loved art. And so we had stacks of art books around, some of which are in my office now. And I plan to foist on Kaylin later when she doesn't bend all the pages. But they were full of these works by French and American masters. And so when I see a Matisse, or I see a Manet, or I see a Whistler or a David, it's really, really evident to me, just by looking at it, who made that. My students also do the same thing, and this is bad news for, or just a little hint for any of you who write papers for other people to read. After about 3 assignments, even if you took your name off of it, your professors know exactly who turned that in. Because we have ways of talking or speaking or writing that are very distinctive. And whenever we do it, we just kind of leave our fingerprints all over it. I also think about maybe the most important creative endeavor that any of us take on ourselves, the raising of children, and how evident our own sort of creative influence on their lives is, and the way they hold their mouth when they speak, and the way that they walk, and the terms that they use. They find all of those things in their parents, I think. It's sort of, at least as a default. I think it still happens. Lisa and I have been married for a long time now. And still, just about every time we go to visit my parents, my dad will do something, and Lisa will just go, "Oh, that's where he gets it." In fact, Kaylin the other day, I have this tendency, which I think is just exercising patience when she's throwing a fit and wants to do something that she's not going to do. I just sort of say, nope, and we keep moving on. And the other day, we were doing something, and she wanted to, I was trying to coerce her to do something else. And she just sort of said, nope, and kept moving on. And I couldn't even really be mad because I just saw my fingerprints all over her. And I was very proud, but also a little bit annoyed, which that makes sense too. But in all of those things, we see something of the Creator in the creation. And in our passage today, we hear that God created the world with wisdom. Wisdom here in this passage is personified as an actual co-worker, the first of his creations, someone who worked alongside him, giving shape to the universe. Now, do I think that God actually made a separate being called Chokhmah to be his shop buddy while he put together the world? No. But the point is that in this passage, we see how wisdom functions in God's creation. And if we're going to understand what wisdom is, we have to know what it does, where it comes from, and how it relates to God, to us, and to the whole world. Sounds easy enough, right? Should be able to take care of that on 20 minutes on a Sunday. Maybe not. It is a stunningly weighty task. But these three themes, what wisdom does, where it comes from, how it relates to everything, these themes are woven together through this whole passage. And woven is the right word. It's not like we can say, oh, here we go. In verses 1 through 5, it deals with what wisdom does. And then 5 through 10 deals with where it comes from. It might be nice if we could read Proverbs like that, because we're trained to think that way. And we expect to encounter information that way. We separate information into categories and then deal with each category one at a time. That's one of the reasons I think we give so much attention to Paul's writing in the Western Church, because Paul, being trained in Greek rhetoric and writing primarily to Greek audiences, dealt with his topics categorically in a linear progression from this idea to the next, and so on. At least most of the time. But that's not how Hebrew writing works. We don't find concepts abstracted from their contexts. We don't pick them up out of the story and then rearrange them to suit us. Instead, ideas come to us the way that we find them in real life, deeply, sometimes bewilderingly embedded in other ideas and activities, popping in and out of the room like old friends, consistent, but not constant. And you'll see that all through the book of Proverbs. You'll have one on taking care of your animals, and then 2 or 3 proverbs about taking care or mastering your temper. And then here's one on family, and then anxiety, and then hard work, and there's self-control again. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to how they're arranged. And that happens in today's passage as well. As these 3 themes of what wisdom does and where it comes from and how it relates all pop in and out of the story, but that doesn't mean there isn't a structure to this passage. There absolutely is. In it, we see Lady Wisdom, portrayed as 2 different characters. First, she's a judge, and then she's a creator. 2 roles that are usually attributed to God, by the way. And I think that's meant as a reminder that we aren't really supposed to be thinking about wisdom as something that we can fully separate from who God is. So let's take a look here in our passage. In verses 1 through 3, before we get to Lady Wisdom, we have this quick introductory passage that talks about where we might expect to find the wisdom of God. And it lists 3 places: on the heights, at the crossroads, and in the city gates. The heights, the crossroads, and the city gates. Why? Why pick those 3? We could find wisdom anywhere. Why are we talking about these 3 places? I think it's because they're public places. And at the time, the heights, the crossroads, the city gates were all important places where people gathered for some activity or another. The heights, if we read through through the Old Testament, were generally places of religious activity. The crossroads were generally places of economic activity where people who lived in an area would bring their goods to exchange them or sell them. And the city gates were places where contracts were made, disagreements were settled, decisions for the community were made. There were places of political power. And so these 3 places of religious and economic and political activity, that's the stage where we encounter Lady Wisdom in our passage. I'm not sure many of us expect to find much wisdom in public life today. But I find it really comforting that, at least according to this passage, when I listen closely in places where people gather, I can still hear echoes of God's wisdom. As I said before, Lady Wisdom enters the scene first as a judge. One reason that we know that's the case is because these public spaces that I just mentioned were also all places where people could find a judge. If you lived in a city and you needed justice, have something rectified, or to talk to your political leaders, you didn't, write an email or something like that. You went down to the city gates where everybody was together. But suppose you didn't live in a city. Then judges would gather at the crossroads, where all the villages sort of came together. Or if you weren't close enough to either of those, you could go see a priest at one of the high places. All of these places were places where people came looking for justice. And listen to what wisdom says there in these places. She says, I speak what is true. I detest wickedness. My words are not just corrupt. My words are just, they are not corrupt. They're worth more than those things that people use to give bribes, things like gold and silver and gems. I hate pride. I hate evil behavior. I hate perverse speech. And then she goes pulls out the big guns. By me kings reign, and rulers make laws that are just. By me princes govern, and all nobles who rule on the earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek to find me. That's quite a passage for an election year. None of this sounds like even remotely familiar to me when I look at our public life. In a time when people on all sides maintain power by contorting facts to fit their narrative, what an utter relief it would be just to hear a leader even pretend to still care about things like this. There was a time when people at least pretended to. I'm not sure anybody really does now. The cat's out of the bag. They're liars, and that's all we expect from them. But That doesn't mean all the news is always bad all of the time. Did you ever read the news sometime and hear that some great injustice had been set right, or maybe even just a small injustice had been set right? And how wonderful that feels. And it doesn't have to be political, right? Maybe it's just when you're out doing business with somebody and they do right by you, even when it's not to their economic advantage. I remember a few years ago, Lisa was driving to a job and she's in her Civic going down the highway, and there's a muffler off of somebody's car. The whole thing, and pipes to match, laying sort of along with the flow of traffic in between two lanes. And just as she was coming up to it, a semi kind of veered over just enough to take it, and it got thrown sideways across her lane. She just went straight over it. Wrecked the suspension. Fortunately, she was fine. She managed to get where she was going safely, and we got the car home. But it was going to be really expensive to fix it. And I was talking to the insurance agent, and she said, well, I mean, technically we could file this as under your comprehensive coverage, and the deductible's $500. But I guess since it's a part of the car, and you hit it while you were in motion, technically we could call this a collision, and you'd only have to pay $250 for your deductible. And we were like, yes, thank you. And technically, she was right. And technically, she should have done that, but she sure didn't have to. And I've never come to expect the insurance company to act in my interests instead of theirs. But man, did I feel good about that. That brief flicker of wholeness and hope that we have when we encounter God's wisdom in our public life, that's us recognizing Lady Wisdom in unexpected places. And then the scene shifts. We see the wisdom of God in creation. Chokhmah is not an afterthought. She's a constituent part of the fabric of reality. Just as we see God's fingerprints on his handiwork, his concern for life, his patience and his resilience, his limitless endurance, his trustworthiness. In the same way, we see what wisdom is made of in what she does. She says, I was there when he set in place the heavens, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundary so that waters could not overstep his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth. I was the craftsman at his side. Wisdom sets limits and maintains boundaries. She begins something with its end in mind. And we are creative beings. We're always making something new. We can't help it. And so Lady Wisdom calls out to us, what new things are you bringing into the world? In your children's character, in your work, in your home? What boundaries are you setting around them? Are you designing those things to help all life flourish? What foundations will support them as they grow? And your answer to these questions will determine whether you're working alongside Lady Wisdom or working on your own counsel. You know I skipped a part, right? In between those parts that I was reading. Well, that's because both of these stories, the story about the judge and the story about the creator, end in basically the same way, with a discussion of the benefits of listening to Lady Wisdom. Because hers is not the only voice crying out in the public sphere. they all make similar promises. The shortcut, the self-indulgence, the sellout, they all promise to deliver you whatever you want. So what do we get from listening to Lady Wisdom? We get the satisfaction of knowing that we did the right thing. Or maybe we get the privilege of suffering for wisdom's sake. Maybe we get a smug sense of superiority over the people who have no wisdom. What does it say? What do we get? Riches, honor, enduring wealth, prosperity, fruit that's better than fine gold and choice silver, blessing, life, favor from the Lord. To me, Lady Wisdom's most shocking claim is that her way is actually better in a material sense. You may think some other path is going to get you something you want. It will not. And the voices in the public sphere cry out, you'll get rich if you cut some corners or exploit a few workers. Just buy the $5 shirt. It doesn't really matter who made it. You're saving some money. Close your eyes and look the other way. Or maybe they cry out that you'll be happy if you just consume enough of the right things, the right food, the right entertainment, the right technical gadgets. If you get enough of it, you'll be fine. Or maybe they cry out that you really should watch something that's salacious or pornographic, because if you don't, you're going to be missing out on something. And Lady Wisdom cries out alongside all of those voices and says, the fulfillment that you want is with her. All the fulfillment you could want is with her. That's kind of staggering. It's staggering to me because I've always heard the reason you turn down sin is because you're getting something better, something more spiritual. Lady Wisdom says, no, you're actually just not going to get it from there. You may as well come to me because I have all of it. So where does that leave our discussion of what wisdom really is? In our passage, we see wisdom is essentially God's own perspective on the world. Wisdom is God's own perspective on the world. It's a love of the world the way that God designed it. It's a desire to keep it and care for it rather than twist it to our own ends. Wisdom is a just leader and a far-sighted creator. And wisdom results in a good and prospering life. But most importantly, wisdom calls out, constantly inviting us to find her in surprising places, if only we are paying attention.